Melissa, I am so excited to have you. Your book is amazing. Write it on their hearts. And it starts with this story of Alexander the Great that really got my attention. And what it was talking about was that Alexander the Great, he had this brilliant method that he didn't just conquer and say everything's going to change, but he didn't like destroy all these norms, but instead he introduced new things, exciting things into the culture. And I felt like that is
Yeah.
exactly what is happening in the church today, that we are
Mhm.
these Christians. We go to church on Wednesday night, maybe for youth group. We go to Sunday, but then all throughout the week, we are being bombarded by this culture. Can you kind of talk about like the entertainment and the different ways that Alexander the Great did it and how we can apply that to today?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm so
Yeah.
happy to be here. Alexander the Great was a really smart guy. He would bring in his things and say, "It's okay. You guys can keep on doing what you want to do. Let me just bring all of these fun things into." And those were mainly in the areas of entertainment, education, sports, and information, and how it was distributed to the people.
Yeah.
And we see all of that in our world today in all of these areas of entertainment, education, sports, and information. And we see the world and the culture kind of like sticking its fingers in and saying, it's okay. You can miss Wednesday night church to go to practice or have a game. It's okay if you play travel ball and don't go to church on Sunday. Or why don't you watch this show and it's only got one guy in there who might not have a lifestyle that you approve of, but he's the funny one, so it's fine. And so we have to be on guard so much for those things that are sneaking into our lives and into our kids' lives. And we have to really be on top of those things because the culture is discipling our kids. But if we're not speaking into those things as well,
Yeah.
then we are letting the culture do that.
Yes. In the book, you have this term vulture culture. What do you mean
Yeah.
by that?
Well, I mean, we've all seen vultures kind of like swoop in and they can just knock out like a piece of roadkill. That sounds kind of gross, but like they can just
It's
take care of it.
true. Yeah. Yeah.
That's their job. That's the job that God made them for, you know? And so the culture kind of can do that to your kids and your family dynamic even if you're not on guard. It can
Yeah.
swoop in and before you know it, what you had is gone.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so true. The I the in the beginning, kind of in the beginning of your book, you talk about the time constraint, and there's like a chart of like how many days and things you have
Yeah.
with your kids.
Yeah.
Talk about that we need this sense of urgency, like how it helps us if we do number our days, like how it helps us to see we are against the clock here.
We are, and it's so hard, especially when your kids are little, because man, the days can seem so long, especially if somebody skips a nap and they're cranky at dinner
Yeah.
time and you can't put them to bed yet. And, the days you feel like they are never ending. But I have a son who's about to start driving, and I'm looking at old photos as they scroll by on my,
Right.
this is what happened 5 years ago, 10
Yeah.
years ago, whatever on this day. And I'm going, oh my, he was just that little. No, I'm sorry, that wasn't 10 years ago. That was
Yeah.
last week. And
Yeah.
so if we don't have that urgency and if we aren't pouring into our kids on an ongoing and regular basis, then we get to where they're driving and we're about to turn them loose into the world. And we're like, oh, wait, but I haven't taught you these things yet.
Mhm. Yeah. In the book, there's this part where you liken, the idea of seeing a movie. So it's like we go and we see this 2-hour movie and it's like,
Mhm.
wow, that was great. And you see these highlights, all these, but we don't really understand that in this movie, it's taken, 2 years basically to make it between
Right.
editors and actors and script writers and all these things. And with parenting, sometimes we want this quick fix of like, wow, look what we have,
Mhm.
but talk about how it's not like the 1, 2, 3 quick fix. We're going to fix your kids, but it's something completely different.
Right. This is not it's not a behavior method change. Like it's not trying to get your kids to pick up their socks off the floor or, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
You're focusing on your kids' hearts. And it takes time to, just like it takes time to put dinner in the crock pot and let it simmer all day long, it takes time for God to write his word on their hearts and
Mhm.
for those things to really have an impression on them
Mhm.
and for them to learn to take ownership of their own faith.
Mhm. How can you test and kind of see, like, how is the culture, we talked about that earlier. How is the culture impacting my children? How can you assess, like, okay, are they coming through okay, unscathed, or okay, slight bruising, or are they like, man, they're dead on the road? Like, how can you tell, is culture getting through to my child in a bad way?
I think we have to have lots of conversations with our kids and we have to ask them those things. I have one kid who doesn't like to talk a lot, and then I
Yeah.
have another who likes to do nothing but talk.
Right. That's usually how it goes with
Right.
the kids.
And so I have to have very different conversations with them, but I have to be just as intentional with
Mhm.
each of them in a different way. And so with my non talker, we
Mhm.
have a deal. When I'm taking you to practice and there's no one else in the car, you
Mhm.
have to talk to me. You like actually say words, no
Right.
grunting or nodding. You have
Yeah.
to say words to me. And so that is one time that I can focus in with that kid and say, okay, let's talk about some stuff.
Yeah.
What's interesting you? What bothered you about that? Hey, did you
Yeah.
see this? Did what did you think about that? And
Mhm.
asking those open-ended questions and letting them share from their perspective,
Mhm.
um, what they saw and observed and how that made them feel, and if it, I've I've asked them, did you have a weird feeling about that kind of a thing when that happened? And just seeing, is the Holy Spirit like kind of poking
Yeah.
you a little
Yeah.
bit when you see some of that? And I have to say those things out loud to them,
Mhm.
and I also have to say those things out loud when I see them.
Mhm.
And so when we're in a situation, I can say, "Oh wow, okay, hmm, I wonder what the Bible says about that, or I wonder what Jesus would say about that, or wow, okay, that's interesting. What do you think about that?"
Yeah.
And it's having those intentional moments and conversations, I think, is the
Mhm.
best place for us to
Yeah.
get that temperature on that.
And really, like, when they're older, like the ages of your kids and my kids, those questions, that's what we're doing. But when they're younger, let's say they're
Mm,
2, 4, 6, that is also more of an instructional time. Can you talk
mhm.
about that? And how that would shift, that conversation would shift a little if your kids were much younger?
Yeah, so with younger kids, they may not even notice things when you're out,
Mhm.
or if you see things, you can say, "Oh wow, okay, maybe that's not the way God planned for things to happen," and then
Mhm.
just move things along.
Yeah.
You can be very simple and very straightforward without providing a lot of detail that would be inappropriate for them, but
Yeah.
you do have to say it out loud because they can't
Mhm.
read our mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when the kids were small, and I have written this book, Screen Kids, and so we are the big delayed devices family. So we have
Mhm.
technology, but we don't have personal devices, et cetera. And I remember, the kids were maybe, 6 and 9 or something, and they're at some play date. And this person who they hadn't seen for a long time was on the iPad the whole time. And my girls were trying to engage, like, oh, do you want to play hide and seek? Oh, do you want to play tag? Oh, do you want to play
Mhm.
whatever? And the kid
Mhm.
just always just chose, I just want to sit here and play my game. So
Mhm.
after it was over, then we just talked about that. It was just
Yeah.
like, what did you think about that? Don't you think it would have been a lot more fun if they would have put that down and played with you? So really do
Mhm.
look for those opportunities. Don't shy away from them, but look for them and say, well, this could have been better, huh? And it really does leave an impression, I think, on your kids. Your husband, who is obviously the co-author with you on this book, he was talking about in the Facebook group that there's always questions like, how can I get my 18-year-old to mind house
Mhm.
rules?
Yes.
Or how can I get my older children focused on spiritual things? These are very popular questions.
Mhm.
How would you address these questions?
in my head, what I say is rewind to when they were 3 and start then.
Yes.
Because we
Yes.
all know that, this takes time. It's not
And
one of
that's a
those
word for
things.
those of you who are listening who have small kids, that this
Yes.
is your time. Yeah.
Start young, start little, but, with those older kids, it's still not too late.
Yeah.
Um, you know, our kids, I think more than ever, they see what we're doing, and
Mhm.
if mom and dad are not doing what we say they should be doing,
Yeah.
then we don't have a lot of credibility. So we have to also remember that, especially our big kids, are watching us. And
Mhm.
if they don't see us reading our Bible, if they don't see us praying, if they don't hear us talking about God and the things of God that matter to us,
Mhm.
then why should they matter to them?
Mhm. Super convicting, right? And
Yeah.
it's part of being a parent, like, it makes you
Yes.
a better person that you think like, "Wow, I need to draw closer to God because if my children inherit my faith, would that be a good thing or a bad thing?" You know?
Right.
But and then we can keep working at that, though. That's not a closed story that we can keep
That's right.
going.
And
Yeah.
we're not perfect, and God did not
Mhm.
ever plan for us to be perfect parents. I mean,
Yeah.
Adam and Eve weren't perfect parents because they'd already been kicked out of the garden before they had kids. So,
Yeah.
like, there've never been perfect parents. And so
Mhm.
we can rest in understanding that we don't have to hold ourselves to some ridiculous, unattainable
Yeah.
standard, but
Mhm.
we do need to hold ourselves up to God's standard. And are we doing our best for our kids with
Yes.
His help?
Yeah.